Hello there, friends. Welcome back. I have a very special, fragile relic for us to study together today. And I hope you have some time to spend with me, because I'm really going to try not to rush through this, as I sometimes am guilty of doing. Really would like to take our time with this one. As you can see from the handwriting on this makeshift replacement cover, this is a miniature atlas. Now, depending on who you are subscribed to out there in YouTube land, you might recognize this fellow. This was sent to me very graciously and generously sent to me by Kev at the Whisper Corner ASMR. And if you are subscribed to him, you know that he did a whole series of videos, 5 videos, I think, where he browsed through this atlas section by section and looked at every map panel. It's a highly recommended and relaxing series if you haven't seen it yet. And just before he was finished with that series, he contacted me and asked if I was interested in doing a video on the same atlas, and if so, he would pop it in the post and send it over. And I was delighted to hear from him, and was very flattered by the gesture and happy to take him up on that. But of course, my mind working the way it does, my very next thoughts were about what I could possibly do with the atlas that Kevin hasn't already done. I mean, he did show us every map in the book. But I realized, as I anticipated the atlas's arrival, I realized that I did have a few questions as I was watching his videos. I had a few questions about the atlas that I couldn't really answer just by watching the videos, just things that I was curious about, things that I would look for if I had the atlas in hand but never anticipated that I would. And I thought, well, perhaps as a starting point, I could at least look at answering these questions for myself, and perhaps those answers would lead me down a path to figuring out what this video should be about. So I want to take you down that same path, and it will lead us to the second half of the video, which is the final thought I arrived at about what might be an interesting thing to do here. So question number 1 was about this date on the front, this handwritten date of 1891. I love knowing the dates that books, and in particular old books, were published. In fact, and I still do this to this day, one of the first things I do, perhaps the first thing that I do when I have a book in my hands, is that I turn to the page in the front of the book with all the publication information, and I look at the year that the book was published. Sometimes that date can be surprising. Sometimes books are older than they look, and it's delightful to be surprised by that information. And I assumed that because someone wrote this date right on this do-it-yourself replacement cover, that they found that date somewhere in this atlas. So the first thing I wanted to do when I had it in my hands was find that date for myself and see where they found it. Is it in the same place as it would be in a modern book? So let's try to find that together. This is 1891 on the cover. So in a modern book, I would expect to see that information pretty early. As I mentioned at the outset, and as you saw, or hopefully saw in the other videos from Kev, this poor book, well, you can see every bit of its age in its condition. The binding has given way, and the little sewn together packets of pages are loose, certainly in the front half of the atlas, so we have to be careful. It does tempt me to investigate what a repair job on this little atlas might cost. Anyway, this page here jumps out at me because I would have almost expected to see a date here, because it does list the title, the publisher, J.G. Bartholomew, and there's some publishing information down here, but no date. There's no 1891 here. I mean, I assumed the 1891 came from someplace and is not just guesswork, but let's keep looking. We come to the contents. You can see that the binding has issues. Geographical statistics. Again, I encourage you to check out the Whisper Corner ASMR for very detailed views and read-throughs of a lot of this information. Now, here we have a table of geographical statistics with populations according to most recent census returns. And down here at the bottom, there are a couple of references. There's an asterisk, I believe. Oh, it's here. Principal states with their colonies and protectorates, asterisk. And then they reference what appears to be a German publication from 1891. This matches the date handwritten on the cover. Just below that, there's a reference to a census from 1890. I wonder if this is the number that the date on the front is based on. I'm not sure how I would feel about that, because it seems, I don't know if unlikely is the right word, but it seems interesting that this atlas would come out in the same year as a piece of data that it is referencing. I guess that could happen, but I'm a little skeptical. Let's see what else we can find about dates. Some more references here, but they're undated. Here we have the population of towns, 1891. So this census information is from 1891. We see the date again. But does that mean the atlas is from 1891? British Isles, 1891. Now we're seeing 1891 all over the place. Here. Clearly, the line was drawn at 1891 for all of the population data, at least for no, that's India there. It's also 1891. Here's Switzerland, and this is snapshot at 1888. 1890 in Germany. this poor binding. $18.90 for the United States. Principal towns in 1890. There's an 1890 referenced here. $1890 must have been a year of a big census. So that's the whole first section of this book, and there are several dates listed, but the latest of all of them is 1891. Maybe that is what the date on the cover is based on. Although, given how that information is portrayed in modern books, I was looking for something a little more definitive, like this atlas was published in 1891. Now we come to the first panel of the atlas section. This is a great panel. Color version of the world here. We see these cherubs and this, I suppose, depiction of the globe there with a crown. I'm not sure of this pronunciation. I don't know if it's imago, imago, mundi. It's Latin. It means images of the world or pictures of the world. And right below the Latin, we have a number portrayed in Roman numerals. Of course, they're a very ornate script and frankly a little bit hard to read. We have the Bartholomew again at the bottom and Edinburgh. But this might be a publication date as well, and I wonder if this says 1891 to match all of the other dates that we saw. I did not notice this in Kev's videos. I did not really see this until I had the atlas in hand. So I wonder if this is 1891 in Roman numerals. Well, why don't we write 1891 in Roman numerals, and then we can compare that to these very stylized script letters and see if we have a match. So I'm going to move this just off to the side a bit. I've got a little piece of cardboard here to write on so that I don't make writing impressions in my soft wood panel here. And we'll just remember our Roman numerals. Let's see, we're trying to write do I need to write darker? $1891. So how do we write 1891? Well, we know we need to start with M. M is 1,000. D is 500. So that's 1,500. We're trying to get to 1,800, so we need some hundreds. That's a C. So if this is 1,500, then that adds 100. So that's 1,600, 1,700, 1,800. M, D, C, C, C is 1,800. Then 91. I think, let's see, I think the most efficient way to write 91 in subtractive notation. Let's see, we know C is 100. We've already used that. We know X is 10. So putting the X before a C would be 100 minus 10, or 90. So this should be 90. So this is 1890. And then an I for 1. That should be 1891 in Roman numerals. Let's compare that to the atlas. Well, I see, so this section that represents 1800, if I look at the first 5 characters, let's see, maybe I'll pick this up. The binding is so fragile though. Is that better? So I see 3 C's in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th position, and I think it's fairly clear to see that the first 2 are MD. So I think the 1800 part is fairly clear. And then 91 is XCI. If we look at the next 3 characters, I do believe I can visualize these as being XCI. The C, of course, has already been used, so we know what the C looks like. And I think I can see enough difference between this character being an X and this character being an I. But in this atlas, there's another character at the end. I'm pointing at it with the corner of the cardboard now. It is different than all the ones used before. And the only 2 we haven't used is L for 50 and V for 5. I don't think it would make sense to put an I before an L and have this be 49. I think the point is to represent progressively smaller numbers, but an I before a V, the V being 5, that would make the last 2 characters 4 rather than 1. It appears that the date in the atlas has a V here. which is not 1891, but 1894. This actually makes a little more sense given the dates on the references. It makes more sense that this atlas would be referencing data that's a couple of years old, rather than coming out the very same year that the data was published. So I think we can see that the date written on this handmade cover is actually 3 years off. It appears that this atlas is from 1894, not 1891. I love little discoveries like that. And it's interesting that it was not as straightforward, not as obviously placed in the book as I would have expected from a modern book. Modern books are very easy to find publication dates for. This one was a little more subtle, took a little more detective work, and that's a lot of fun. The second question I had when I saw Kev's videos is based on an assumption that I made when I first saw this atlas in his video. The assumption about the cover itself. When I saw this, it was clearly some do-it-yourself contraption, and it frankly looks like wallpaper material. And I assumed that the original cover was gone and that this replacement was used after the loss of the original cover to try to keep the pages together in some way. And I was very curious about what the original cover might have looked like. I was wondering this before I'd ever gotten the offer from Kev to have the book sent to me. I was just, it made me sad that, while the pages were beautiful, it made me sad that the original cover may have been lost and replaced with this kind of sad substitute. And so I went to Google to try to search for an image of this, a copy of this little antique atlas in its original undamaged form. And so I searched for Bartholomew miniature atlas. And what I found in the search results that came up ultimately inspired the whole second half of this video. Ironically, I never did find an image of the original cover of this atlas, but the results that came up told me that Bartholomew was actually a much bigger deal than I thought. This J.G. Bartholomew, I found out that Bartholomew, in fact, was a multi-generational map publishing company from Scotland that in fact still exists today in a form as a subsidiary of HarperCollins. This is the J.G. Bartholomew. That is John George Bartholomew, who lived from 1860 to 1920. This fellow is, in fact, the grandson of the Bartholomew that started this company, and he is notable for several things. For one, under his guidance, when he was the head of the company, he brought the company into prominence as a publisher of their own map works, their own cartography, rather than just creating and publishing maps for other companies. So the rise of the company as its own cartographic creator and publisher happened under J.G. Bartholomew's tenure. Also, very interestingly, is that this Bartholomew is credited for the naming of the continent of Antarctica. J.G. Bartholomew is the first to start naming that continent on maps. It had apparently been largely ignored and unnamed before that. So it turns out that not only was the company a long-standing concern in map publication, but this gentleman in particular, who was at the helm when this particular atlas was published, was quite an influential Bartholomew. And the fact that this company produced atlases over so many years, and indeed a version of this miniature atlas over so many years, inspires what I decided to do in the second half of this video. But as I said, all of that interesting discovery aside, what I was really looking for was an image of the original cover, because I assumed, based on what I saw, that the original cover was gone. But when I received it in the post from Kev, I realized that I was wrong. This makeshift cover did not replace the original. It was just put over the outside to try to keep everything together a little bit better. Kev just never showed us the original cover. But it is here, underneath this wallpaper. And so, if you don't mind, I'd like us to have a look at the original cover by taking this off. Again, we have to be very careful because the binding is pretty much non-existent. We'll slip it out of the back as well. This really does look like wallpaper. Here is the original 1894 cover. Miniature atlas. And on the spine as well. And the back. You can see that these marks here, the bottom and the top, are echoed on the back. We can see, of course, lots of wear and damage, but I find it a charming original cover. It makes me wonder even more about what a little repair would cost on this little book. It would be nice to see it stand on its own again and be able to be flipped through with this original cover. You can see very clearly where the binding has given way. It's in the atlas part of the book, not so much in the gazetteer section here at the back. These little page bundles seem to be still attached to the spine, but all of these have given way so that their edges now are all uneven. But the original cover is still here, much to my surprise and delight. It just adds to the charm to see it completely original like this. I think I am also noticing a slight change in coloration between the front and the back. The back seems a bit more red in this light, and the front seems a little more brown. It's very easy to imagine this book perhaps sitting on its back, perhaps at the top of a stack of other books, and the top being more exposed to the light or smoke in a room than the bottom, which was more protected. But there's a lot of charm that comes from seeing a very old book, a very small book, but something that was clearly handled quite a bit. It was referred to quite a bit. It would be different if the book was absolutely pristine. The book picks up value, I believe, by its use and its handling. And while we lament the condition, we cannot deny that it was used and referred to and perhaps loved by a great many over the years, and every person who opened it to look something up imbued the atlas with meaning and value. Books are meant to be opened. It's clear that this little atlas has done its part over the years. And that's an amazing thing. So now we have dated the book, and we have revealed its true face. In part 2 of this video, we're going to look at just a handful of the map panels inside, but in a different way than our friend Kev did. And again, inspired by the fact that Bartholomew created these mini atlases over many, many years and through many different production techniques, and over the evolution of the science of cartography, and indeed the art of cartography. And that will inform what we do in part 2.